Alright guys, so for today's video, we're going to be looking at comparing all of the Dragon Ball games on current gen, specifically 3 main games, and we're going to break down the components of each game, and not really review each one, because I've reviewed some of these games, but we'll just go over the 3 games. So we have, obviously, Xenoverse 2, which you saw from the first card, and then good old Kakarot, which is our newest game, and a game I've done a review for, so if you want to see more about that, there's a video on the channel just reviewing this game. And then finally, the newest game that I've added to my collection is Dragon Ball FighterZ, or if you want to pronounce it as Dragon Ball FighterZ, however you want to say it, that's cool. But this is the newest one, and this is the one I'm going to be the worst at. I also don't claim to be good at any of these games, alright? So don't be going down in the comments saying I'm garbage. I know. Alright, but we're going to start out with Xenoverse 2, and we'll break it down from there. So to do this in kind of a backwards order, instead of talking about the core gameplay mechanics that all of these games need and have, we're going to talk about the extras for Xenoverse 2. Alright, so this game definitely has the most content out of the 3 games on this list. Well, Kakarot is long. It's something that you've definitely seen the story before. You know what's happening. And it's a story-based game. While there's some side quests in it, it's nothing special. Right? So Xenoverse kind of has a whole new story, and it just has more there to play around with. Okay? With that, it has the create your own character kind of function that some games have, and this is kind of a personal taste. I know some people don't like playing as a custom character. They'd much rather just play as Goku or a main character, but I started off in that boat not liking it as much, but as you unlock new moves and customization, I began to like this aspect of the game more and more. Another really good extra feature for this game is the use of the Dragon Balls and how they actually implemented them in a way that was meaningful to the gameplay. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, there's a good balance here, unlike in Kakarot, where it's ungodly simplistic how it is to get the Dragon Balls and make a wish that doesn't really matter. In this game, it's much more difficult. You have all these different wishes you can make, and of course the best one is getting more usable characters. This is just a great way to introduce more characters to the already huge roster in the game. But speaking of the roster, now we're going to move to the core things that all of these games need to have. Number 1 is the roster. You need a big character list. There are a lot of characters in Dragon Ball, alright? So many different series and transformations and versions and all these different types of characters that you have. And you just have so much potential for so many different characters. Just, there's no reason you shouldn't have a huge list of characters. And Xenoverse does exactly that. Now, there are DLC characters, which I'm not a fan of, but just the base roster the game gives you is absolutely massive. And not only does the game have this huge character list, it has variations of each character. Those silhouettes you're seeing underneath the names of the characters, those are each different classes, you could call them, with different move sets, different, buffs, and just completely different styles of playability for each character. So what we're going to do now, instead of individually looking at the 3 aspects in each game, and then switching to games and you forgetting what the last game we even talked about was, we're going to look at the roster now in Kakarot and then in Dragon Ball FighterZ. Alright, so let's look at the Kakarot roster. Well, it doesn't have such a neat screen to depict the number of characters. This is what they have, and it's nowhere near what Xenoverse has. So if you look, you see those little blue silhouettes, the symbols of the people on some of these characters like Kid Trunks, Android 18, Goten, and those symbols mean those are assist characters. So you can't even play as those characters. So the only real playable characters in this game is Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, Piccolo, Trunks. Those are your main playable characters, and this is more of a story-centered game, so it doesn't necessarily need that huge roster as a fighting game, but it would have been nice to just have more of these side characters, as support characters, I guess I should say, as just main, characters with fleshed out abilities and combos and all of that. But let's look at the next game, which is Dragon Ball FighterZ, and this is probably the biggest DLC list that I have a problem with. There's just a lot of DLC characters in this game. Not that there's not a lot in Xenoverse, and I'm sure there will be in Kakarot, but the core roster is alright. It's a little bit weird, the variations they give you for certain characters, but, you know, like I said, it's better than Kakarot, but it's nothing compares to that Xenoverse 2 level of just hundreds of characters, so Xenoverse 2 definitely gets a point for roster. So the next, really, probably the most important factor in a Dragon Ball game is the actual combat, the fighting itself. So first we're going to look at Xenoverse 2. And so I revisited this game after probably 3 months of not playing it, and it wasn't as fast and just fluid as I remember it being. Now, definitely not as good as I was when before I stopped playing. But just the overall combat, compared to the other 2 games on this list, felt really slow and non-flashy, I guess is the word for it. It wasn't flashy enough, right? The special moves don't give you these crazy camera angles with all this screaming, and while there are some cool, special moves and things you can pull off, it's just not at that level that I would like. Now, between those other 2 games on the list, I cannot decide. I really, really like this style of the open world combat for a Dragon Ball game. That's what I've always played, what I've always preferred, but I'm really starting to like Dragon Ball FighterZ style as well. Alright, and this combat in Kakarot is what we'll talk about first. It's fast, and that's the best part about it, right? Whereas that Xenoverse gameplay was kind of sluggish, and again, I'm not as good at Xenoverse as I am at Kakarot, but it's not as fast, it's not as flashy. The moves are bright and they're detailed. Everything looks great in this game, and it plays great. Now, not performance-wise, the game has frame rate issues, but there's a review on that, go watch it. But overall, just the combat, the punches, the combos, the special moves, everything in this game feels great. But listen, I know how the comment section works. I know everyone's gonna be like, but you literally just spam B, there's only one attack button, and you are not wrong. You do just spam B with one button press difference at the end, alright? But no matter how simple it is, because I had the same problem. You can watch my review, plugging it for the 4th time, and see I complain about the same thing. But it doesn't matter. It's so fun. Just the gameplay. Like here, you're just pressing B. That's literally all you're doing. But it's so fun. Just the fun level of the fights are just insane compared to the other games on this list. Nothing gives you that feeling of just smacking your opponent than the simplicity and just the pace of this combat system. But next, let's talk about the game I'm probably the worst at, Dragon Ball FighterZ. So the combat in this game, it's completely different. The license, the audience for the license for this game are used to that open world, fighting style, like in Kakarot and in Xenoverse 2. So when you first play this, it feels a little bit weird, and it's almost overwhelming because you're not used to maybe this level of complexity. Even Xenoverse kind of has it a little bit simpler as far as the combat goes, but with this game, to be at least halfway decent, and don't even think I'm there, you have to really have mastered the buttons and just what to use when to counter this and that, and it's the fastest out of the 3 on this list. So it's one of those games that definitely feels the best when you're doing good, but it feels the worst when you're doing bad, and those other games don't exactly have that kind of I'm trash syndrome. There's some of it in Xenoverse, but I would still argue that's a relatively easier game than this. But, so overall, I don't really know where to place this game because I'm not the greatest at it, so I haven't reached that tier of just god-level smacking people. So, I think for combat, the way to go is put Kakarot on top, because that's what I've played the most recently. That's what I feel is the flashiest. While FighterZ has that flashy and big hit feeling, it's just not in the same level as Kakarot. So for the last third crucial part of a Dragon Ball game, I wanted to put graphics, but you can't really argue with graphics between specifically Kakarot and Dragon Ball Fighters, just because it depends on what style you like, that 2D or the open world. So instead of doing graphics, I'm going to do the amount of content in the game. Alright, and so I touched on it earlier. I'm just going to be blunt with this. I'm not going to go through each game. It's Xenoverse 2. Well, Kakarot by no means has bad levels of content. It's in that 20 to 30 hours if you do everything range. So it definitely has your money worth in content, right? And the combat's great, but nothing compares, again, to Xenoverse's just level of content. I mean, even looking at the roster, they give you so much there, and when it comes to the story and the side quests and the raid type events they have and the multiplayer and the side missions, there's just so much in Xenoverse. As far as content goes, I would say that probably Fighters is the weakest of the three, just based off a really weak story kind of model that they use. They have a map system where you go around, and it's a lot of tutorial based stuff. It's just a weak story system, and the game kind of prides itself, while there is an arcade mode, mostly on multiplayer. So that's where you really got to focus with that game. If you're big into fighting against other players and, 12-year-olds yelling at you on the mic that you're trash, then that's the way to go. Fighters, it's all over Fighters. But as far as story content, side content with multiplayer and progression, I just think Xenoverse offers the most. So with that being said, we're going to give the content category to Xenoverse 2. So based on the score, you can see that Xenoverse won. But I left a timestamp at the beginning of the video for you guys to jump to if you just wanted to see, trying to make a quick purchase, you want to know which one of these three to buy. Alright, and here's the simple rundown of it. Alright, Fighters has that quick, fast, arcade type fighting style with a lot of focus on multiplayer. That's Fighters, alright? Xenoverse 2 has heavy story, campaign, side missions, arcade, multiplayer, with a lot of focus on just a large roster of characters you can play with. Alright, that's the best part for Xenoverse. Kakarot, it's really that Saiyan Saga, the Cell, it's that Dragon Ball, the traditional story we all know. That's what you're getting with Kakarot. The combat is fun, it's great. The story is obviously repetitive because you've played it 100 times and seen it 100 times. But overall, it just depends on what you want. If you want, like I said, multiplayer, it's Fighters. If you want just hours of gameplay, it's Xenoverse. But if you just want a fun fighting game that has a Dragon Ball kind of skin over it, then the way to go is Kakarot. Again, it's up to you. I don't have a favorite at any of these games. I like all of them. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what your favorite one is, and I'll see you on the flip side.